During the 200 years when Rome had been busy forming a nation in Italy, the Romans gave little heed to what was happening in the rest of the world. Themistocles, Pericles, Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great, Aristotle, and other Greek leaders lived and died as the power of Rome began to grow. Greek civilization ruled in the eastern Mediterranean, and another great power from the east established itself in the west. Once Rome looked out upon the rest of the world, she found this power right on her doorstep. What she saw was the commercial empire of the Phoenicians, who had fled from Alexander the Great. Their greatest city, Carthage, had been founded by the Phoenician princess Dido, who had so loved Aeneas that when he left Carthage, she had cursed him and had vowed eternal enmity toward him and all his race. Carthage was a great port for ships of trade. All the trade between Africa, Etruria, Spain, and Sicily went through Carthage. Men of all lands traded in Carthage. They had one interest in common: money or gold. The Carthaginians fought to control trade routes by closing their harbor to any ships but their own. Their chief competitors were the Etruscans and the Greeks, who had settled in Italy. The Carthaginian army was made up of mercenaries, men of many races and many tongues, who had no special love for Carthage but loved wages, so they were not very trustworthy. Carthaginians believed that there was nothing that money could not buy. From 264 to 201 BC, Rome and Carthage came into great conflicts with each other, which would decide whether the Phoenician or Punic power of the Rome or the Roman power was to become the leading power on earth. These struggles are called the Punic Wars and were led by 4 personalities who stood out as leaders: 1 Carthaginian and 3 Romans. The Carthaginians had taken possession of Messana, a Greek city in Sicily, and the Greeks called on Rome for help against the invaders. Fearing that they might also try to invade Italy, the Romans fought and defeated the Carthaginians and drove them out of Sicily. The Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca became filled with a burning hatred for Rome and vowed to avenge the disgrace he had suffered in defeat. When he tried to raise a new army, the Carthaginians showed no interest and felt no patriotism. So Hamilcar went to Spain, hoping to form an army there. Before going, he had asked his 9-year-old son Hannibal whether he wanted to come with him. Hannibal begged to be allowed to go. Hamilcar took his son to make a sacrifice at the temple and to have the boy take the vow: "I will never hold friendship with the Romans." Hannibal kept his vow to his dying day. Hamilcar died in Spain 10 years later when Hannibal was 19 years old, too young to command an army. But by the time he was 26, he became commander-in-chief of the Carthaginian army, and his one aim was to deal death to Rome. Hannibal won the love of his troops because he was fearless and calm in the face of danger. He never seemed to tire. He slept only when he was not actively busy with his other duties, and then only for a few hours at a time, not caring whether it was day or night, wrapping himself in his cloak and lying on the ground among his soldiers. He dressed in no way differently from his soldiers, and was first among them in battle, the first to enter the fight and the last to leave the field. There had been a truce between Rome and Carthage for 23 years, but now a quarrel arose over a colony of Greeks in Spain. It was protected by Rome and the only spot in Spain not under the power of Carthage. Hannibal besieged this colony, Saguntum, and won it in 8 months. Rome prepared for war. This was the Second Punic War. In 218 BC, Rome sent an army by sea under one of the consuls to attack the Carthaginians in Spain. No sooner had the army landed in Spain than it was recalled to Rome because of the most unexpected news. Hannibal was invading Italy. Hannibal had led about 50,000 foot soldiers, 9,000 horsemen, and 40 elephants by land north over the Pyrenees, through the south of Gaul, and over the Alps into the valley of the Po River. It had taken him 15 days to cross the Alps, and over half his men died in the severe, cold conditions. Hannibal himself was blinded in one eye, and it is recorded that only one of his elephants survived the trek. The Carthaginians had fought their way through wild tribes of mountaineers, Gauls, and Celts, who sometimes rolled great boulders down on Hannibal's army from the mountain heights, and at other times trapped it in narrow passes. Many men and animals slipped over the precipices and slid down the cliffs. Horses were frightened by the shouts of attacking Gauls, and the baggage animals, heavily laden, rolled over the ledges like falling houses. After 9 days, Hannibal and his soldiers reached the highest point of the Alps. After climbing the steep, pathless slopes, the troops rested, but were filled with fear when it snowed. Throughout all these misfortunes, Hannibal had stayed calm. Now, when he saw that his men were about to give up, he climbed a peak and showed to those who were with him a view of Italy and the rich valley of the Po. He shouted, "You are now crossing not only into Italy, but into Rome itself. In 1 or at most 2 battles, you will be the masters of Rome." The descent into Italy was worse than the climb. It was steeper, more slippery, and many more were lost. Once in the valley, they camped to rest and regain their strength. The Romans had never dreamed that Hannibal would invade Italy by crossing the Alps. Led by the consul Scipio, they now hurriedly set out, with a certain amount of dread, to wipe out the Carthaginian camp. Instead, Scipio was wounded, defeated, and rescued by his son. The Romans withdrew, were joined by new forces, attacked again, and were defeated again. They returned to Rome. Hannibal rested in the Po Valley for the winter. In Rome, men and women were uneasy. In the spring, Rome sent an army under the consul Flaminius against Hannibal, but Hannibal had already marched through the spring floods and through Etruria to position his army between Flaminius and Rome. He ambushed the Romans and, in a great battle, defeated them utterly and killed Flaminius. At the time of the battle, there was an earthquake that destroyed towns, broke off cliffs, and altered river courses, but the fighters did not even notice, so fiercely were they engaged. Another great battle at Cannae was lost by the Romans when 70,000 of their 80,000 soldiers were killed. The defeated consul returned to Rome in despair. If he had been a Carthaginian, he would have been put to torture. But in Rome, he was met by thousands of citizens and thanked because he had done his best. The Romans had sent tributes to Carthage, a bushel of golden rings. However, Carthage thought Hannibal was doing so well that she sent him no money and no reinforcements. 2 Romans now rose up as leaders, Quintus Fabius Maximus and Publius Scipio. The Senate decided to appoint a dictator and chose Fabius. He admitted that Hannibal was a greater general than any Roman, but he also knew that Rome had the greater spirit that could not be worn out. He introduced the policy of avoiding battles with Hannibal. He had his army follow Hannibal, harass him, attack him, and hide, here a little, there a little. The Romans laid waste to fields so Hannibal could not supply his troops with grain. Fabius, wanting to weaken Hannibal bit by bit and gradually wear him out, was thought by many Romans to be a coward. They named him the Cunctator, or the Delayer. For 12 years the Romans struggled, for their spirit never broke. Hannibal, who remained in Italy for these years, never attacked Rome herself, but was driven slowly southward. It was a deadlock. Hannibal couldn't conquer Rome, and Rome couldn't drive Hannibal out of Italy. Now Publius Scipio, the son of the Scipio who had first met defeat by Hannibal, became consul. He proposed attacking Carthage. It was agreed. He set sail, reaching Africa, made an alliance with an African king, marched against Carthage, and defeated her. Carthage sent for Hannibal to come from Italy, although she had never sent him reinforcements or supplies. She now begged for his help. Hannibal was greater than Carthage, so he went and gathered whatever army he could. Scipio met him in a long, fierce battle at Zama, a few miles south of Carthage, and, for the first time in his life, Hannibal was defeated. Peace was made. Scipio was given a great triumph in Rome and named Africanus. He was the first commander to be given the name of the people he had conquered. The terms of the peace were that Rome won Spain and all of the islands between Africa and Italy. Carthage had to give up all her ships of war and all her elephants and pay Rome a yearly tribute of 200 talents, which are a type of coin. 500 Carthaginian trading ships were towed by the Romans into the harbor and burned. Carthage was left free as a nation to rule herself, yet forbidden to go to war without the permission of Rome. The Third Punic War took place about 50 years later, in 143 BC, when Rome found out that Carthage was breaking the treaty and rearming to fight a Numidian prince who was the friend of Rome. Rome sent another army to Africa and besieged Carthage for 2 years, and finally burned the city to the ground. The ground where Carthage had stood was salted and plowed under, and a solemn curse laid upon anyone who would ever attempt to rebuild her. Thus Rome became the mistress of the western Mediterranean. And what happened to Hannibal? He left Carthage and spent the rest of his life in exile in the east. There, Scipio Africanus met him in years later at the court of an eastern king. They talked together, these two, and Scipio asked Hannibal, "Whom do you consider the greatest commander in the world?" Hannibal answered, "Alexander." "Who is the second greatest?" asked Scipio. "Pyrrhus." "Who the third?" And Hannibal answered, "Myself." Scipio smiled and asked, "What would you say if you had vanquished me?" "In that case," said Hannibal, "I would say I was greater than Alexander, Pyrrhus, and all the commanders of the world."